Hey guys, welcome to the next Lex build. This is going to be a HTML5 video player, and the concept here is heavily inspired by Mr. Wes Bos. And basically he did a video on his JavaScript 30 course where it was a full theme of a video, HTML5 video, and using the video element in particular. So what we're going to do is skin it, but also control it with JavaScript based on the video you're playing. So here you can have your own like loading bar, your indicator. You can slow down the video or speed it up for full speed. You can jump back 10 seconds and play it by clicking anywhere, or jump forward 10 seconds, etc. This video it actually doesn't have sound. I just grabbed it off a free resource site, so feel free to experiment with whatever you want to choose there. But jumping in, there is some groundwork to be laid for the HTML and CSS. So I would say reference this wholeheartedly as opposed to me telling you every bit we're going to deal with. But the HTML I'll jump into. So we've got the video itself wrapped in a giant player div, which is our main wrapper. And from that, we are going to create controls with CSS, HTML, and then buttons that will actually target with JavaScript to do certain functions. So we have a general play button, a progress button, and then a div within it. That's going to be the filled process, which will animate based on the video duration and playback speed. And then on top of that, we have input sliders that are actually range sliders. So these are real native range sliders that have a volume indication and a playback rate. So volume won't really apply to this video, but it should to whatever you use if you use a volume-based video. This one is silent, so it doesn't matter, but I put it in here anyways. And we have data buttons to skip. So these are just buttons that have data attributes, which we'll hook into to use that actual value to skip ahead or rewind a little bit. So this is that. And all in all, the HTML is basic. You're still using a basic video attribute and HTML element. But you might want to actually do more than just the source here if you're going to do this in production or something. So you want to use different source attributes. So that would look like within the video tag, you can do this thing called source and then do an actual source and link to the appropriate file. Different browsers like different versions, so you might experiment there. I know MP4 is a pretty good standard, but there are other limitations within Firefox and Safari and stuff. So I won't get into super much detail with that. And then up here, I commented out some icons I'm going to be using in our JavaScript. I didn't want to have to actually type this by hand, so that's why you see them here. In the final piece, I'll actually link this all up, and it should look pretty nice, so you can actually review it based on your own if you're following along. The CSS itself, we did some just dynamic stuff with the actual background. Of course, it's a nice big blue gradient with some nice treatment to the video itself. The player has a max width, so it's set to just be this width as opposed to just like full screen or something. And then I just styled it however I liked. On hover, we're doing an animation where the actual track bar comes up as opposed to always being in view. It's kind of a nice to have, but not necessarily necessary. So you could just have it like this and it's fine, but maybe hovering over it, it would do something else. But I kind of just followed Wes's lead with this stuff. So I would definitely give him most of the credit here. I'm just doing my own take on it. So don't pick it apart because it's not really my 100% thing. Other than that, we have some custom stuff, and then we have stuff to hook into the ranges, which are kind of browser specific. So feel free to copy and manipulate this stuff. Some placeholder kind of content that's just necessary for us to style these things that would otherwise have default styling that look pretty ugly personally. So yeah, so other than that, we're going to hook into a lot of the class names that we defined in our HTML, and then hook into the advanced functionality of controlling that with JavaScript, using mostly ES6 kind of concepts and some different ways to hook into objects as well. the first step is defining and querying for all our actual DOM elements. So let's start there, and I'll do a lot of consts here, so bear with me. Player is going to be the main div around the actual video element, and controls. So we'll do player, this div here, straightforward. Then we will do const video. You can query from the previous element. So say you queried to the player, you can actually use that element to query into that DOM element too. So it's like all these nested things in the DOM. So this is that fancy way of doing that. It really allows you to scope things and make sure you're selecting what you want. So this will be player video. And then we'll do progress. Again, player.query selector. Will be progress. And progress filled is going to be the div within our progress bar, which is going to be what actually fills as we play the video. I just call it progress filled for now. So we'll do player again. Query selector, progress, or I don't know why I named it filled progress. My mind works backwards maybe. And then toggle player dot query selector, toggle play. And skippers, I call them. Okay, so the skippers is going to have a query selector all, and it's going to be, we're going to look for all the data's attributes that are skip. So if you remember the buttons in our HTML that were actually skipping, they have this attribute data skip. So you can actually query for the data attribute, which is awesome. So we don't really need to query for this player button, which is nice, but I'm doing that mostly for styles. And then we'll do the same with ranges. So this is going to be our input sliders, or ranges, whatever you want to call them. So player query selector all, and it will be player slider, which will be these here. So they both have the same class. All right, with that done, we can kind of get into the logic of everything, which is going to mostly be adding a bunch of event listeners on most of these things. And then when each thing happens, we can hook into the video API in the browser and do things. So like play and pause are part of that API. We don't have to like invent what that is, which is why video in HTML is so great lately. So what we'll do eventually is mostly target the video itself, which we've set here. The actual video is on the video element, so player video, and add a bunch of event listeners. So let me just go ahead and add these, and then we'll add functions that do the logic. So I want one for click. So clicking on the video itself, we want to actually toggle play. Probably get some errors in this console just because. And we want one to actually play, so add event listener play, and we'll say we would need to update the button to show the pause state instead of the play state, and then add event listener pause. We'll do the same thing. So we're gonna, the function is basically gonna toggle the state of the button icon, which I have in the comments up here. I'll show you what that looks like soon. And then we want to, of course, update the timeline. So I could show you this. There's an event called time update, which is actually part of the video API. So we can do progress update. And then again, going down the DOM, we can go and find the toggle, which is going to be the actual button to toggle playback as opposed to the video itself. So instead of just clicking on the video to play, it'll be the actual button. So it'll do the same function as our first event listener we put there. And then our skippers, we'll do a fancy for each. So we're getting into some arrow functions here, which are new to me, and I like them, but they're a little hard to read personally. So typically for in each loop, you'd write function and then pass in something, in this case, maybe a button, and then open your curly braces, come down here and do logic inside. Well, if it's just minimal what you're doing, you can actually minimize that into just being that button and then an arrow function, which basically symbolizes that function we wrote, that function, empty function, and then do our actual button instance, which is this. This is what the logic we're gonna do. And then we'll add an event listener for each of those. Click, and then we'll call a function skip. So all these functions I defined already, so I know what they're called. You probably need to do, like, if you're doing this, inventing this, you probably need to do each one like pretty grossly and then come back and refactor so it looks like something like this. I'm just saving time. Just to show you how this is all going to hook up. So ranges, we'll do this similar thing. Range button, or excuse me, range dot add event listener change. So anytime you move the slider, or range, I call it a slider, we'll update a function called range update. And I'll probably copy that, paste that. We just want to do the same thing on mouse move for good measure. And then we can set a variable called mouse down equals false. And this just initializes what that actual value is going to be when we first fire the app or the video. And basically what we're going to do is update it to be true as we're scrubbing the timeline or something with the mouse itself. So the progress element, which we defined right here, is related to this div, and then inside that's that filled progress div, which we defined below. So we can access that element, add an event listener, we'll call it click, and a scrub function. So we want to be able to like click on the timeline and just skip ahead any which way based on the length of the video divided by the actual place you click. So it's going to be actual math that we're going to end up doing. It's kind of complicated, but I think in the end, it's, as you read it, it makes sense. Progress. So we'll do another one with just capturing all these different events that could take place. Mouse move. There's a fancy one. You can capture the event and do the same arrow function like this instead of writing a new function and opening your curly braces. So we can do it all in line. And you can just do mouse down and scrub E. So on mouse move, we'll pass the event in, and mouse down will be false in that case, and then the scrub event will be actually capturing the event itself. So once we pass in the scrub function, we're going to be using what the output of that function is in this place. So it doesn't make sense yet, but it will. So progress dot add event listener mouse down, can't spell. And again, with the arrow functions, we could just do a quick mouse down, set it to true in this case. And one more. Looks like I have an issue there. M should be that and that. And then mouse up. We'll toggle it off, so the progress line won't update in that case. So there's all of our crazy event listeners. I know it's a lot to take in, but what we'll do now is define all these functions we passed in for those. So the basic one, toggle play, is pretty much a no-brainer. We can go and swap, create a function, toggle play, pass in some logic here. So this is going to be, we're going to query for the actual play button in this case. Document.query selector. Oops. And this will be toggle play. Which is, let me find that right here. It's the actual icon. The button wrapping the icon is going to do the magic here for us. So then we could say if this, which refers to what we're calling in the event listener, so video in this case, since we're calling it here, this refers to this at its highest scope. It's probably confusing, but this doesn't refer to anything in this function because the function's being called here, which is the sub entity of the video. So that's why that is the thing. So we could just say this paused. We could do toggle play button dot inner HTML equals, I'm going to do ES6 backticks here. And that way we can pass in some crazy HTML and it will render just fine, as opposed to doing typical string, which would not. So there's that. And then actually the string might render okay, but I still want to do those backticks because that's how I did it. So then we can do an else and then just say if it's not paused, we'll just say the button's going to have the play state. So toggle.play button, or toggle play button, inner HTML equals the other icon, which is going to be this one. Which, if you look at the title tags on these, it says pause and play. It kind of gives you some indication there in case you're following along. Great, so I can go and click that. Oh, I'm writing the wrong function right now. This is the update function, excuse me. Update button. Okay, so let's go and write the toggle play function now. So function toggle play. This is going to be a fancy one where we can do it all in line, and we're going to set a play state. So it's either going to be play or paused, and we could hook into the video based on that. So we could say video.paused. So if it's paused, we'll toggle the play state to play, or else paused. So that's a one-liner that's basically saying if the video is paused, show the place, or yeah, basically show the play state, otherwise show the pause state. And then we can hook into this new way of doing, it's not new, but it's another way of doing object modifiers. So typically I would write like video.playstate and then fire that function. This way you can do, I think Wes did it this way, video.playstate. And then from that you can fire the function. So we're passing in this this const element and then firing the function based on the video state. So it's fancy, but it does work. So hopefully if I click this now, should get some activity. Doesn't look like it's working now. Okay, so function skip is the next function. We'll take the video.current time, and you can access that by console logging the video if you want to see. So we can just go to our dev tools. We get the video element within it. Sadly, you can't see it in this editor because I use Firefox, but let me see if I can open it. And there's the video class. So we can actually go into this element and look for current time, which is actually a attribute, which is right here. And of course it's at 0 because it hasn't started yet. The indication here is literally just CSS, so there's not actually anything hooked up to it. So we have that to access, and we could find that in our function itself. So let me go, I'll just use Firefox for now. So function skip is going to be, we'll open those brackets, can't type, and it's going to have the video.current times, the one we just looked at, and that we're going to set that or adjust it based on the skipping. So we can actually hook into that API and tell it where to skip. And our numbers, we have to do a float. So it needs to be a dot decimal kind of typical scenario. So we could take the video data set dot skip. Actually, it's not the video, it's going to be the button, because we're going to pass this into the skippers, which we're doing the for each for. So this is kind of confusing, but for each button, we're actually hooking into the data attribute on it, which is this, and then grabbing that attribute and then using it to parse integer that figure and then update the current time of the video, which is relative to it. So that's a mouthful, but that is working. Let me close that with a semicolon. The next function is going to be the range updates. And this will look like video of the object of the video. We can get this.name equals this.value. So for the range update, we're doing the same for each, and when you pass that through, we have this instance of range, and we're able to say, take the video of this particular thing, and of course we can say name, which is on the slider element itself. So we got volume and then playback rate, and then we're going to set that to the value. For each range update we take, and we're passing through each of these ranges, it should update the video. Finally, let's do function progress update. So we call this one for the actual timed event update. So we're actually going to update the timeline based on that. So this yellow bar will actually be dynamic, which is the beautiful thing. So we're going to have to do some math with this one. So we're going to say percent equals, we'll take the video dot current time divided by the video duration. So we're getting some math based on that, and then multiply by 100 for the seconds we need. So these curly brackets or parentheses mean perform this bit first and then multiply it in JavaScript and most programming languages. So then we finally access that progress filled variable we've set at the beginning, and we'll set a style.flex basis. And camel case for styles is a JavaScript standard, so that is something to remember. It's a big gotcha if you forget. So then we could just say percent. So if you want to console log the percent, see if this works. So the progress update is being called on the timeline. So let's see if it does anything. Looks like I can't type. Lists inner. Scrub is not defined, no duh. Okay. Let's see if this works. It might error out because I haven't defined those functions. Yeah, there we go. So we're getting that actual float integer going from the video itself, which is great. But you notice our CSS isn't updated yet, and our video play state is not working either. So let's debug that stuff. We'll do a scrub. Function. This will be the final function. And this one we do require the event, so you can pass it in the event itself, and we could get the scrub time. Just call it that. And the event's important here because we're going to get the offset x of it and divide it by the progress offset video.duration is the actual algorithm behind all of that. So the scrub time will actually be the event's offset, so wherever we click, divided by the width already, or the actual progress width, and then multiplied by the whole video's duration. So it's kind of a conundrum there. So video.current time will equal that. So that's how we update it. Okay. Let's double check our work. I want to make sure I have everything spelt right for sure, because I think I do that often. I forget and mess it all up. And one little bug I saw is I didn't add the % sign there, so we need that to actually be the CSS that transcends into where we click, where we see the video playing. So now it's updating automatically, so that's cool. I'm still getting the issue with the place stopping, but we do have our skipping working, which is great. I think I can control playback speed as well. Here's full speed, here's slow. See it slow down if you can. Pretty neat. So we're very close. Let me double check the play state and see if I can figure out what's wrong. Hopefully it's just like a typo or something. So I will come back and see if I can get that hooked up. All right, guys, I've figured it out finally, and it was typos. So a important thing I overlooked is I had paused here, and it couldn't find the video element based off of that bullshit. Anyway, so fixing that toggles the playback just by clicking this button, which is good. But we can also click the video, so that's cool too. For like mobile, that would be very handy. And updating the button was also an issue because I put the opposite here. I had pause, and it should be paused. And to me, that's like, why those are different, I have no idea, but that threw me for a loop, and they should be the same personally. But yeah, so anyway, we can play and the button switches, and we can adjust the volume, of course, and the range slider slows the video down, as you can see. And I could jump back 10 seconds. This video is like only maybe 20 seconds, so this is going to jump all the way to the end. But so far, so good. We got everything hooked up. It's working great. So yeah, I think that's about it though for the how it works kind of concept. You could extend this further. This is a very object-oriented approach. I think, like I said, it's heavily influenced by Wes Bos's tutorial on one of his JavaScript 30 course excerpts. But I thought this one was neat and worth redoing and seeing what I could do to put my own take on it. I used my own icons and did a different toggling technique as opposed to just HTML characters that he used. Among that, I changed naming conventions, styles, accents here and there, but most of all, it's very similar to what he did. So it's neat that you can hook into pretty much all the HTML elements and do things like this. So like things that come to mind are like select fields you can hook into and do things with, inputs, checkboxes, all that stuff. While you can do a ton of it with CSS, you can do things with JavaScript too. I plan to do another video on actual form elements and manipulating those based on like maybe you're checking a box, something should show, otherwise it shouldn't, or if you check something or input something, maybe some front-end validation kind of things. So I'll hook into that coming up. This series will probably just continue on and on as I discover new concepts or ideas. If you have your own ideas, feel free to comment on each of these videos. I'll see it. I read every comment. So other than that, I'll keep cracking, and hopefully you learn something from this stuff, because I am as well. That's the whole point of this series, is for me to learn more and more. I learn by doing and also by teaching. So I enjoy it, and I hope you do too. All right, that's it for now. Peace.